The wind moved across the ancient stones like a whisper from a forgotten world, soft, trembling, and strangely alive. That was the moment everything changed for Daniel, though he didn't know it yet. Months later, when thousands of viewers would watch his video in stunned silence, they would all point back to this moment and say, this is where the story began. But for now, he was just a man standing on the dusty ground of Aksum, Ethiopia, searching for answers he never thought he'd need. Daniel had spent his life chasing facts, not faith. As a documentary filmmaker, he believed in what he could measure, touch, record. But when his mother passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind only a cryptic note, "What is lost is written in Ethiopia. Find what the Ethiopian Bible says before it's too late," his world broke open. She had been quiet, humble, deeply spiritual, the kind of woman who prayed without announcing it and gave without expecting anything back. Why would her final words be about an ancient text thousands of miles away? So he followed the trail. And now he stood before an elderly monk whose eyes held a depth Daniel had only seen in people who carried lifetimes of untold stories. The monk studied him for a long moment before speaking slowly, as if choosing each word with the care of a sculptor shaping stone. "You seek the Ethiopian Bible," he said, "but you do not seek it for the reason it was written." Daniel tried to respond, but the monk raised a hand gently, silencing him. "You seek answers, yet the Ethiopian Bible does not give answers. It reveals paths." Daniel didn't understand, but he nodded, because something in the monk's voice made him feel like a child being spoken to by someone who truly saw him. The monk eventually led him past thick stone walls and into a dimly lit chamber where ancient manuscripts lay protected behind layers of glass. Their pages, darkened with age, seemed to glow faintly under the flickering flame of nearby candles. Daniel stepped closer, his breathing unsteady. These were the texts, older than the King James Bible, older than the versions he grew up hearing in Sunday school. Some contained books Western Christians had never seen. Others held stories long forgotten or deliberately removed. But there was one manuscript the monk pointed to specifically. "This," he whispered, "contains what your mother wanted you to find." Daniel felt his heart thud painfully. "Why? What does it say?" The monk didn't answer directly. Instead, he carefully unsealed a protective cover and revealed a single page. On it was written a passage Daniel had never heard before, an extension of the Book of Enoch, preserved only in Ethiopia. The words described a moment when humanity would feel abandoned, when darkness would grow louder than hope. But then, just when people believed they were alone, a voice from heaven would speak to those willing to listen, not with thunder, but with a whisper. For a moment, Daniel forgot to breathe. His mother used to tell him, "God doesn't always shout. Sometimes he whispers so only those close to him can hear." The monk gently traced a line across the manuscript with a thin stick. "This passage is not about the end of the world," he said. "It is about the end of a person's world. When grief, fear, or loss breaks you, this text says God draws nearer, not farther. He waits in the silence, speaking through soft nudges, small signs, quiet moments. Your mother knew this. She wanted you to understand you were not as alone as you believed." Tears blurred Daniel's vision. He turned away, embarrassed, but the monk laid a hand on his shoulder. "Let your tears fall," he said softly. "Truth enters more easily through an open heart than through open eyes." As the hours passed, the monk shared more passages, verses about angels walking among ordinary people, prophecies describing hidden protection, and writings about God's unyielding pursuit of the lost. But one message struck Daniel deeper than the rest: before a man understands God, God understands the man, completely. Daniel had always thought faith was about people trying to reach God. But here he was, in a stone chamber in Ethiopia, realizing that maybe it was the other way around. Maybe God had been reaching for him long before he ever cared to look back. That night, Daniel stayed awake in a small, humble room the monastery had provided. The silence pressed around him, but it felt different, comforting, almost warm. For the first time since his mother's death, he allowed himself to remember her fully, her laughter, her gentleness, her way of loving even when life was cruel. He remembered how she prayed for him every night. He wondered if those prayers had somehow led him here. The next morning, the monk handed him a small wrapped bundle. "What is this?" Daniel asked. "A copy," the monk said. "Not of the full text, only of the passages your mother would have wanted you to read. Carry it, not to teach others, to heal yourself." Daniel opened the bundle and saw the familiar ancient script. But tucked inside was something else. His mother's handwriting, a small note he had never seen before. When you read these words, know that I am at peace. And know that God has been with you in every moment you felt alone. Don't chase answers, my son. Chase him, and he will show you the rest. Daniel broke. Years of held-back grief poured out of him in shaking sobs. But unlike before, the grief didn't feel like drowning, it felt like cleansing, like something heavy was finally lifting. For the next several days, he stayed at the monastery, speaking with the monks, learning about the Ethiopian tradition, about the survival of ancient scriptures through persecution, fire, and centuries of secrecy. He filmed everything, not as a skeptic gathering evidence, but as a son honoring a final request. What he discovered was that the Ethiopian Bible wasn't just a book, it was a mirror. It showed humanity's weakness, yes, but also its potential for unimaginable strength when guided by faith. He learned how stories were preserved by priests who memorized entire books to protect them. How communities hid sacred texts during wars. How generations believed so deeply that they protected these writings at the cost of their lives. Daniel realized this wasn't just history, it was devotion. It was love, and slowly, he felt faith returning to him, not the childhood version he abandoned, but something deeper, wiser, shaped by pain and restored by truth. When he finally returned home, he carried with him not only the manuscript copy but a new purpose. His documentary wasn't going to be a simple historical explanation. It was going to be a testament to hope, a story of a son who found God again through the final words of a mother who loved him beyond the grave. On the day his video premiered, Daniel stood behind the camera as thousands of viewers tuned in. He watched comments flood the screen, people crying, people saying the message touched them, people sharing how they too felt abandoned, lost, empty. And at the end of the video, Daniel spoke directly to the camera, his voice steady but full of emotion. "If you're watching this," he said, "and you feel like your world has ended, I want you to know what the Ethiopian Bible taught me. God does not shout at the broken. He whispers. And if you're willing to sit in the silence long enough, you'll hear him. I thought I lost everything. But I was wrong. I was found." The screen faded to black. But long after the video ended, the message stayed alive in the hearts of the viewers, an ancient whisper carried across ages into the life of anyone willing to listen. What the Ethiopian Bible said didn't just change Daniel. It changed everyone who heard the story. And somewhere, perhaps in a place beyond time, his mother smiled, because her final prayer had been answered.